Former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton are among those celebrating the life of Congressman John Lewis today. We spoke to them yesterday exclusively about how he influenced them both as civil rights activists and a friend during his more than 30 years in Congress.
I never was around him that I didn't feel bigger and better and that I didn't want to do something that made a difference.
President Clinton, you called him the conscience of the nation. What do you mean by that?
He was nearly killed at Selma and one or two other times in Tennessee. And he just kept doing what he thought was right.
A lot of people are hoping that the Pettus Bridge will be renamed, too, and called the John R. Lewis.
Yes.
In 2000, I was holding his hand walking across the bridge on the 35th anniversary. Then Hillary was a senator, and both of us walked across with him. And then he walked across with President Obama. He was always there. Whether he was tired or full of energy, he was always there. He showed up to honor people and events he believed in.
Someone said about him that he never made you feel guilty, he just made you feel responsible. Do you think that's a true characterization of him?
Very good.
Yeah,
absolutely.
When you first heard the news that we had lost him, what was your initial thought?
It was such a sense of both personal loss and a sense of national tragic loss, especially at this time, Gail, where his voice, his moral authority is so desperately needed. It was such a joy of my life to be his friend. And I want to say something about joy, because we talk about his incredible life of service and activism and, yes, putting his life on the line, but he was a joyful man. He was someone who had a good time. If you ever saw him dance, he had a big smile on his face. He had a joy that just was contagious.
I like what President Clinton said, Madam Secretary, about him showing up, because I think the fact that he showed up at a book signing for you at a Costco, I look at that picture, but when I think of a book signing, I don't think of Madam Secretary Hillary Clinton and Congressman John Lewis at a Costco together.
I just remember looking up, and there he was. I was so surprised, and he had that smile on his face that I love seeing, and he goes, "Wow, I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd come by, see how you were doing." That's the kind of friend he was.
What does his loss mean to the country, do you think, especially at this particular time?
I think one of the things that I did feel very grateful for, having known him for a long, long time, was that he lived long enough to see the outpouring of public support after what happened to George Floyd and all those other fine people who lost their lives. Finally, there was this galvanizing of opinion in America, as John said himself, was much broader based than what happened in the 60s and the civil rights years. So I'm glad he lived to see that, and we need to finish the work now.
Yeah, and here we sit in the country right now. We seem to be going through two crises, actually. The coronavirus pandemic, of course, and now the racial strife and racial injustice that we're all feeling. He spoke a lot about getting into what he called good trouble. I love that phrase. What does that look like to both of you as we try to move forward and heal during this time?
I think we have to remember that the great genius of John Lewis, through all those years in Congress and all those years in the civil rights movement, was that he knew how to make good trouble, and he knew how to heal troubled waters. It's a matter of heart as well as mind, and he was a genius at it. The rest of us need to be searching for that perfect pitch he had.
Thank you very much, Clinton. So number one, guys, their team said to me, because I said, when was the last time they sat down and did an interview together? They said, how about a gazillion years? But they were so excited to sit and reminisce about John Lewis. Everybody was in such great spirits, because that's what John Lewis does for you. He just makes you feel good. It's so hard to process his loss, but he left us with so many wonderful things. Bill Clinton told a story of that before he was going to endorse him for a particular race. He said, well, I need you to do something about environmental justice first. And he always had words of advice for people. He never made you feel guilty. He just made you feel responsible.
Yeah.
And he will be dearly, dearly and sorely missed, Anthony.
Yeah, I love that phrase you used, Gail, and it reminded me of something that Mayor Andrew Young said, which was that he could break down barriers with white people just with the sheer force of his spirit. We will be talking to Ambassador Andrew Young in the next hour.
Yeah, and as we think about what good trouble means, I'm reminded that by John Lewis's own tally, he was arrested more than 40 times, 40 of them in the 1960s,
Yes.
5 after he was a member of Congress. Think about that.
Congress,
Yeah.
yes.
All right.
Yes. And Tony, he was willing to be arrested again, too.
I know.
That's
He
the
was
thing.
looking
He was
at
willing
46.
to be arrested
Yeah.
again for something that he believed in at 80. Yes.
Absolutely
Yes.
right.